Daniel Nahmod.
You've had to be strong for so long, you don't remember who you are. But when I see you, I see myself too. I know the child hidden in your heart. You're only human like me. You're lonely sometimes like me. You're longing for love like me. You're just like me. I know the ones who most hurt you are those you trusted most of all. But to forgive them is to live again and heal the heart of that child so small. You're only human like me. You're lonely sometimes like me. You're longing for love like me. You're just like me. We cry for a safe space, a quiet space to be, where a soul shows its true face, where love flies free. Me. You're lonely sometimes like me. You're longing for love like me. You're just like me. I understand. You're just like me. I've never understood how you turned out so good. with all that you've had to endure. No one expected you to make the best of you. The deck stacked against you for sure. The more that I learn, the more I admire how you never got burned being forged in a fire. Yeah, an ordinary mortal would have quit by now, with a life like a field full of mines. You're human, I know, only muscle and bone, but you must have steel in your spine. You never talk about when you first figured out that you'd have to go it alone. It breaks my heart to picture you, a child hiding out of view, so young to fight on your own. But still here you stand, and still here you are, igniting the world with your luminous heart. Yeah, an ordinary mortal would have quit by now, with a life like a field full of mines. You're human, I know, only muscle and bone, but you must have steel in your spine, and that would explain how you never admitted pain. So let me just say that child has a lot to be proud of, but no longer needs to keep the world at bay. If you were mortal, you'd have quit by now. You've been counted out so many times. You're human like me. You can bruise, you can bleed, but you must have steel in your spine. Yeah, mortal would have quit by now, but your light was determined to shine. There's so much more than they see, a superhero to me. Yeah, you must have steel in your spine. You must have steel in your spine. Oh, 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 yeah. If this is my last song, if this is my final day, if tomorrow I'll be gone, what do I want to say? If this is my last song, if it's my time to go, when my body's moved on, what will I have to show? Oh, but fortune and fame, they scatter to the wind. The things that make a name just don't matter in the end. But is the world a little more peaceful? Oceans and skies a little more blue? Is humankind a little bit wiser about the good that we can do? Does the sun shine a little bit brighter where before there was only rain? If so, then I'm glad I came. If these are my last words for all of the earth to hear, if all that I have ever been is about to disappear, if these are my last words, there's nothing that I need to say. I have only tried to serve. It's never been about talking anyway. So much hurt there is to heal, it's hard to understand. All I can hope to feel is that I am doing what I can. Is the world a little more peaceful? Oceans and skies a little more blue? Is humankind a little bit wiser about the good that we can do? Does the sun shine a little bit brighter where before there was only rain? If so, then I'm glad I came. Have I given hope to the hopeless? Has a hungry soul been fed? Has a child stood a little bit taller 'cause of something that I said? Have I left a little kindness? Have I eased a little pain? If so, then I'm glad I came. For that, I'm so glad I came. If this is my last song, what do I leave behind? What do I pass on if I am out of time? Subject of the morning is vulnerability. And I just decided to sing you off the top a few songs of mine that are either about vulnerability or are particularly vulnerable for me to sing. It kind of only slowly dawned on me over the years. I've sung, performed thousands of times since 1998. And there's a certain kind of exhaustion that I feel after I sing. Like, I've taught classes about performing, and it's something that will sometimes surprise other performers when I'm teaching. Is I'll describe this complete depletion at the end of it, like after a concert, after a service, after a talk, whatever it is. And I sort of slowly realize that the reason why I'm so depleted at the end is because I do something, I think mostly innately, just sort of naturally, that might be called method acting, in a way. If you're not familiar, the essence of method acting, as I understand it anyway, is remember Raging Bull, that Robert De Niro gained 50 pounds for or whatever and became a vicious fighter. And the notion is that you immerse yourself in the character completely. You're not acting the lines, you are the character. You're not acting as something. And I have songs that have absolutely no factual connection to my life story, but that just felt, I had a feeling that I wrote a song about. But when I sing the song, I find points of connection and I feel them. So I have a song I wrote about a woman who was diagnosed with breast cancer, and when I sing it, I think about my bubby who had breast cancer and died of breast cancer. Even though I did not write the song even remotely about her, if that makes sense. So when I sing Last Song, the line that like pained me to write, I wrote it in 2006, but the line that pained me to write, pained in a kind of a good way, I guess, in a way, but was, does a child stand a little bit taller because of something that I said? That line is always, when I'm singing that song, I've sung that song many times since I wrote it, and I am thinking about what if it actually was my last song. And of course, as you might imagine, well, when I wrote it, I didn't have wife, baby, dog, mortgage. I didn't have that life. The life I have now wasn't there. So at the time, I was thinking of my nieces, who are now 20 and whatever, 20 and 17, some ridiculously high number. They were just baby. Actually, I think only one was born when I wrote it, maybe. So then over the years, when I sing that line, I think about different kids I've met, and whether I made a positive impact, whether I did say a sentence that could have done that kind of good. And then once Jude was born, it changed, of course, to I almost always think of Jude when I sing that line, and particularly because I'm sometimes singing, in this case, 95 miles from home, and in some cases, like last weekend I was in Florida, so that's 3,000 miles from home. So I sometimes will think, what was the last thing I said to my boy before I left? Because it's something to consider is, what words will ring in his head if this were my last song, if my plane went down or my heart stopped beating, what words would ring in his head for the rest of his life, presumably? What was the last thing I said? Sometimes when my wife and I are bickering about something and I'm going somewhere, I will pull out my trump card and say, I'll say, "Love you, gonna miss you," and she'll like, "Mm-hmm," and I'll say, "Now, if my car goes off the road, do you really want me to hear that? And you want to think of?" She's like, "Oh, I love you too," So, and with a song like Just Like Me, I wasn't sure when I wrote that line whether it made sense to say, you're only human like me, you're lonely sometimes like me, you're longing for love like me. But I've never gotten pushback from anybody who said, I'm never lonely. And it's not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for love. Nobody's ever said, don't rope me in on that little vulnerability train. I'm not there. It feels like everybody is at some point or another. And then the song Steel in Your Spine is intended to reflect a growing awareness that I have that most of us, if not all of us, are survivors. It's a joke line I use, but I'm never kidding when I say it, that we all have the extreme misfortune of being raised by humans. And those humans themselves were raised by humans. And on we go back in time, and therefore, man, oh man, mistakes are made with kids. I make them every day with my boy. And I do my best. And is there an arc? Is there an arc towards perfect parenting? Maybe, but it's a long, slow arc that I can safely say no living generation will see. But we are all that way. We are all broken by something, wounded by something. Fear has been struck in us by something. A feeling we had was, every single one of us, a feeling we had was not received with love or compassion or kindness. A feeling was rejected or mocked. Everybody. Put down, ignored, everybody. So there are literally too many examples in nature to count. But, you name the life form, and a little, 2 seconds of research would show you and me how that life form protects itself when it's been hurt. That's easy. In fact, most life forms are in a kind of a long-term covered up and protected mode. At the top of the food chain, I think maybe lions are hanging out in the savannah and rolling around. And bears are gamboling across, wide open hills, and they don't care who sees them. But almost everything else is hunting and being hunted, and is eking out a living. Very few animals have the luxury of seeing movies or taking vacations. One of my favorite comedians, Louis C.K., talks about how awesome it is that we're at the top of the food chain. He's like, almost everything else is walking around looking over their shoulder to see if a tiger is coming after them. And we take strolls. And for most of us, most of the time, it's not true for everybody, of course, but for most of us, most of the time, there's actually very little danger. For most of us, most of the time, there's very little danger that anything is hunting us. It just isn't. It isn't. That isn't our defensiveness. That isn't a guard we necessarily need to keep up. Especially in Southern California, we're not even girding against the weather. I mean, most of the world is armed to the teeth against the weather. The most we do is get natural gas so that we can heat a house, or get, whatever it is, or get electricity to power an air conditioner. We barely cover our bodies with much more than, it's freezing in some places in America, and I'm wearing, nothing, a cotton shirt, and nothing over my hands, nothing over my ears. I don't have to protect myself from the environment in most ways, most of the time. I once heard a DJ say that real estate in Southern California is free, but the weather costs a fortune. And I never forgot that. Especially, I don't forget it when I travel around the country and go to a place where, geez, it's unpleasant. Actually, Florida is, known as a vacation spot. My God. I think I literally sweated from the second I got off the plane to the second I got back on the plane, because it was, 80, 85, 90, and 90% humidity. As my grandmother would say, a schwitz. Anyway, haven't heard that word in a long time. I haven't used that word in a long time. But anyway, so those are not the ways that I, or more like, most likely you, protect myself or ourselves. That's not the kind of defensiveness and protectiveness that we need. There is another kind, though, and it comes from. Well, let's presume we're a relatively advanced life form on Earth, because we actually have sort of invented the basics to guard ourselves from basic harm. Top of the food chain and all. Weapons and steel cages in our cars and gloves for when it's cold and little foot warmers, the chemical reaction you drop in your boots. Have you ever used those? Like when you're skiing or something? Oh my God, it's unbelievable. You shake this little packet and a chemical reaction starts, and it's like a slow burn. Probably is literally a slow burn. Don't really want to think about that. And you put it in your boots, one in each shoe, and you walk around and your toes are toasty the whole day, no matter how cold it is outside. What would a bear do for that? It just seemingly has never thought of it. Or does a bear maybe not even mind it? Anyway, so what kind of things do you and I, protect ourselves from? The bully at school, rejection at work, mockery, insult, judgment. We protect ourselves from, like, we're in our sphere at the top of the food chain. Our defensiveness and self-protection, our vulnerabilities, I think, are mostly, for most of us, most of the time, emotional. And you'd be hard-pressed to find a person who doesn't have seriously good reasons for being self-protective. I mean, like I said, we are all beat up, physically or not, but certainly emotionally, by life in general. I mean, you think about the first socializing that we are necessarily given, as children, as babies. You learn. I was joking earlier about Forrest the dog, peeing and pooping everywhere, and I said, well, we all would if we could, and it is literally an act of training for years to teach us to stop doing that. But if you think about the number of things that are coached and coaxed and insisted, demanded out of us, the number of instincts we have that we are taught to suppress, the number of blurted comments. A friend of our family is a teacher, and she just told my wife that a student in her fourth grade class, I think it is, walked up to her and said, "You smell like stew." She means the food. Stew. And our friend just started laughing, but this is the kind of thing a little kid says. "You smell like stew." She didn't even know if it was an insult or a compliment. It's pretty vague, depending on the stew, really, and how long it's been sitting in the fridge. Or, stew is a pretty wide range of smells. So as I was thinking about vulnerability, I'm going to go over there, and I was thinking about vulnerability, and I was thinking about the value of vulnerability. This whole month, and the theme, Centers for Spiritual Living does this kind of clever thing. I haven't really tuned into it too much over the years, but they kind of provide like a year-long curriculum or a sort of a series of themes month by month. And this month, the theme is vulnerability. And so I am pretty sure I'm going at it from a slightly different direction, maybe than Suzette is going to go at it in the next few weeks. But when I started thinking about vulnerability, my mind has been blown, actually, contemplating the value of vulnerability and in how many different areas of yours and my life being vulnerable makes it better, and being protective makes it worse. Okay? The more I thought about the most valuable, beautiful, rewarding, creative, loving, joyful, happy, sincere things in life, the more I thought about the richest, most beautiful things in life, the more I realized that a necessary ingredient is vulnerability. And yet, you and I get beaten around by all kinds of things. I don't know about you. It was a few years ago, and I suddenly realized, this is a very random thing to mention, but I'll only mention in case somebody else here, in case it's the value of somebody else in this room. I only realized a few years ago, in a sort of half-sleep thought, my feelings got hurt a lot every day. It suddenly occurred. Every response that isn't what I was hoping for, every interaction that's a little weird. First time I released an album was 1998. The new album is the 23rd. You'd think I'd have thick skin, and maybe I kind of do. And thick skin is kind of the point of the day, the discussion. But when I released that first album, I was so proud of it. And went to my first gig, where it was on a CD table, and I sold half a dozen copies. Whatever, it was $15. I went home like, oh my God, there's some people at home listening to my music. That is so cool. And you know what I then did? I waited for them to call me and tell me how much they loved it. And or buy more copies to give to all their friends because it was so beautiful and, you know what I mean? Transcendent. It's a hard lesson to learn, for example, that not everyone is going to respond the way your literal or metaphorical mother will respond. They always say in songwriting classes, if you want to find out if a song is good, don't play it for your mother. That does not add any information, And I sold that first batch of CDs, and then went to another gig and another gig, and very, very few people ever ordered a second copy. And over the years, there's been a trickle of a few people saying, I just love that first album. And it's too late. My vulnerability went away on that, like my hope for it to... What would you hope if you made an album or released a book? Everybody has sort of the same sort of vision. It's going to be a bestseller. It's going to be a runaway hit. Everybody dreams. You open a business and you imagine lines out the door, or you open a church and you imagine, having to knock out walls. Everybody envisions, what if this catches on fire? Well, that album did not catch on fire. And it is one of those little tiny wounds that I received many times and still do. And I realized, like I said, in my half sleep, wow, I get my feelings hurt in little and big ways every day. And that was it. That was the whole awareness. And what does it do to me to have my feelings hurt 100 times a day? When somebody looks at me sideways, or I think they are, let's say, or somebody doesn't respond to an invitation, or some, you know what I mean? Somebody writes something that feels unappreciative or unkind, or somebody in traffic, or somebody at the store, or my wife, or our boy. Right, he hugs her and doesn't hug me, for example, in a moment. Well, I laugh it off. It hurts my feelings. Just a little every time, right? We are, I think, and maybe I'm projecting, but if you're relating, great. We are confronted with 1,000 of those little moments every day. And then there's the big ones, needless to say, where we have a choice to swing wide the doors, why I chose that song, or to go, screw you. You're not going to get another shot at me. So, like I said, I'm just going to talk a little bit. I should talk about folks can hear. By the way, hello on Zoom. Hello on Zoom. I didn't mean to not say hi a long time ago. Of course, I didn't say hi to them either, so just to be fair. So examples, right. So examples of... I'll give examples, but I almost need to. If I asked you, the greatest achievements of your life, did you achieve them while, highly protected?
Or did you have to get vulnerable? The person you fall in love with, there was a moment you had to make eye contact. Or you had to ask them out. Or you had to walk across the room to say hello. Or you had to tell them, this is going to sound like an extreme example, but I've always enjoyed advice columns, so I have strange little stories in my head from advice columns over the years. But every so often an advice columnist will get a message, something like, a woman will say, I am dating this man, and we haven't been intimate yet, and I haven't told him that I had a double mastectomy. I'm afraid that when I tell him, he'll leave. Right? Or that I have a scar from heart surgery, or that I had cancer as a child, or that I am diabetic, or, somebody actually wrote once, I lost my right hand in an accident, and I don't know whether to put it on the dating site. Right? Okay, so obviously, it's easy. Dating, falling in love, there's a moment of vulnerability or it ain't going to happen. It just ain't going to happen. But how about learning to ski? This is one of my favorite examples of the difference between a kid and an adult. An adult, mortified at how many times he or she is about to fall. Because learning to ski is falling, like learning to roller skate or ice skate. You're gonna fall. And yes, people will see you. And yes, they'll even chuckle. They will. Behind their masks, mostly, but they'll be laughing. It will look funny. All you got to do is watch, America's Funniest Home Videos to know how funny it is to watch somebody fall. But you watch a 5 or 6 year old learn how to ski, and they don't care if they fall. It's just kind of a part of it. They don't even know that it's funny. They just fall. And then what do? Get back up. And, it's literally true that a 5 or 6 or 7 year old will learn to ski in an hour, at least on the bunny hill, in the most basic way. Because vulnerability is not a challenge for the lucky kids in the world. And for an adult, you're afraid of everything about it. A friend of mine once described skiing as sliding down a mountain on waxed sticks, which he added doesn't sound like it would be a good idea, And all you can think of while you're standing at the top of the hill, and I can say this from personal experience, is so many things about this are going to go wrong. I don't have control. Who am I kidding? What about a tree? What about other skiers? What about falling? Will the skis are designed to snap off your boots, which is very important, because if you take a tumble, you don't want your knee to snap. You want the ski to snap off. And you think, what if it doesn't? And I have taken falls that are just absurd. When you lose your balance on a hill, depending on the slope, you will fall any which way, and you can't stop falling until you get lucky and you find some obstruction. You know what I mean? Or the snow gets frictiony. You can keep sliding down the hill. The hill kind of decides when you stop if you don't know what you're doing, and it is embarrassing. And vulnerability means you just do it anyway. But we've all had the sting of being laughed at or watched, and we all know how it feels to be beginners at something. And is there a greater vulnerability than being a beginner at something? Even if you are, you can be a professor of molecular biology with a degree from Yale, but the day you start taking pottery class, you're going to ask the 19-year-old kid who teaches it how the hell to do this, and you're a beginner. And I would say that feeling of vulnerability, of exposure, keeps most of us most of the time from trying most things, like skiing. Like my boy is now playing soccer. He is absolutely uninterested in sports in general. No interest. Certainly no interest in the competition part of it, which is just like me. Just, no pun intended, but just like how I was as a kid. I always enjoyed it, but as soon as it became clear that some people involved in the game cared if they won, I suddenly felt stupid, being a part of it. That was just me. My younger brother, that was when he came out to play. So he always won, and I always didn't, because I just didn't care enough. But Jude went out to play soccer with a little team, and I mean a little team. I mean a league of 2 teams, each one 6 10-year-olds, and it was the perfect dynamic because there were so few kids and so few teams, there was no league. So we accidentally stumbled into a soccer league that didn't have wins and losses, and it was perfect for him. But that didn't stop a kid from making a sarcastic comment about Jude's lack of skills on the first day. And Jude just came over to me and took a sip of water in one of the breaks and said, "A kid just called me trash." I'm like, "Sorry, what?" He said, "Yeah, he's good and I'm not, and he just called me trash." And I'm like, "Wow, what'd you say?" "Nothing. The coach said something though." And I found out later the coach gathered the team and said, "We are teammates. We build each other up. We don't break each other down." And Jude just said, "I just figure he's just the jerk on the team." I'm like, "Yeah, okay. All right." But how many of you, and would I, persist at a game that he had truly no skill at? I mean, I'm saying it online, and I shouldn't even say it online. He'll never see it. But, I mean, really, and he wouldn't tell you he has any skills. But he was just kind of making a go of it. And by the way, after the first 6 weeks of this little thing, he said, "I'll do it again." And we just signed him up for another 6 or 7 weeks. Still doesn't have any skills. He's faster than most of the other kids, so he has a little advantage on defense. There's a couple things he can do, but not really. He's not a soccer player, neither am I. But he's just kind of doing it. Well, I would not. And I couldn't list the number of things I've never tried because it felt too vulnerable to try them. I couldn't even begin to tell you. How about auditioning for something? If you've ever auditioned for anything, it is the nakedest, most self-immolating, humble thing to do. How about the vulnerability required for, I'm going to go general here, and then you can fill in the blank in your own life. The vulnerability required for hoping for something. Hoping the cancer gets cured. Hoping the kid grows up okay. Hoping you get the job. Hoping you get into college. Hoping she calls you back. Planning a party outdoors and hoping the weather holds up. These things require vulnerability. If you close up, you ain't going to plan the party. You're not going to apply to the school. You're not going to audition for the play. This is like I said, I just got my mind blown thinking about how valuable vulnerability is and how emotionally counterintuitive it is, because we all know the feeling of the failure of it, the abuse of it, the hurt feeling of it. And again, if you don't, great. But if you do, right, no one is wrong for staying non-vulnerable. But in a relationship, does anybody actually get to know you if you remain bulletproof? Do you ever show, if you're sitting around and a conversation turns to something about which you have a strong disagreement, if you go along to get along and keep your mouth shut, it's a clear and understandable attempt to make new friends, to not ruffle feathers, so that to stay in the group, whatever it is. But does anybody in that group actually know you at that point? If you're not saying it, then they don't know you, and it's the sort of a classic, the classic compromise that you get to be in the group, but you're alone while together. You know what I mean? We've all known that feeling, I imagine, of feeling lonely in a crowd. And the crowd, and that loneliness comes from not being known, and not being known comes from not sharing the truth of you. And not sharing the truth of you comes from not daring to, and not daring to comes from learning that sometimes when you do, you get beat up for it. You do lose a friend. Dating doesn't work out, for example. Or a job doesn't work out. We're all taught to apply ourselves and to get the job, the dream school, the whatever it is, and we construct what we need to construct to achieve it if we're going for something. But what we're almost never taught is that if it isn't a fit, a no is as good as a yes. That we expose ourselves, we're afraid to expose ourselves to the rejection, so we don't even try. And in not trying, we forget and negate the reality that I won't get the job if it isn't right for me. But I can't get the job if I don't apply. Right? Asking the girl out is terrifying. She'll never go out with me if I don't ask. Right? And if I do ask and we go out on a date, odds are like 99% it's not going to work out anyway. But it is one of my favorite little lines, is if you don't try, you have a 100% chance of failing. Well, we're all safer not trying. But in not trying, we're not actually allowing. I'm not a woo-woo person, but if we don't even try to do the thing, to be the thing, to learn the thing, to achieve the thing, if we don't even try, we're giving ourselves a 100% chance of that truth of ourselves never turning up in our lives. And we're negating the reality that if we look around in our own lives, the best things in our lives come in the unplanned ways. We don't actually decide what works out and what doesn't. Not really. How do you make a relationship good? By being really you. And of course, being vulnerable. And of course, doing that can chase somebody away. The risk is always they find out who you really are and they don't want to be with you. Right? But the alternative is to keep your armor on, to wear a mask 24 hours a day, and be lonely while together. And I once heard another great line about, like in the sphere of jobs, that if you are miserable at your job, you are not only robbing yourself of good work that feels good and does you good, but you're also robbing somebody else of the job that they belong in. You're actually occupying a space that is somebody else's happiest place, or like right place. Yeah. So So I'm going to run down a couple other things and then wrap up about this notion of vulnerability, because if there's any takeaway I'd leave you with just on the subject of vulnerability for this week, I would just invite you, and I'm not a hypocrite on this, I'm doing the same thing as I'm talking, invite you to consider areas of your life that are less than satisfying, that are less than fulfilled, less than realized. And ask yourself whether you are protecting yourself against a worst possible outcome, or whether you are fully, truly invested and vulnerable to that thing's success or quote-unquote failure. If a relationship isn't quite right, have you said that out loud? Is there a greater vulnerability than saying, I want to be your friend? Or, I don't want to date you anymore. Or, I don't want to be married to you anymore. Or, this doesn't work for me this way. Is there a greater vulnerability than looking somebody in the eye and risking the whole thing with a sentence? Every time I write a song and then sing it for people, I have to decide whether I want to be that vulnerable. I was thinking about the dog's name is Forrest, and we all Run Forrest Run is going to be. He's going to respond. There's going to be something he's going to respond to. He's going to respond to Run Forrest Run before before he gets too much older, because he's going to hear it so often, like Jude hears "Hey Jude," and then ha 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 ha. And he's going to hear it the whole life. But Run Forrest Run, just as a little example of vulnerability. We think of movie stars as impervious and airbrushed lives and no problems whatsoever. But imagine you're Tom Hanks and you're hired for this to adapt a book into a movie, and the book is called Forrest Gump, and it's about a guy from Greenbow, Alabama. I don't know where Tom Hanks is from, but I'm pretty sure he's not a Southern guy. And imagine the vulnerability he had to show to take on that accent. Okay, now again, that might sound small, but when's the last time you tried, or I tried, to do something that truly exposed you to the mockery of millions? Because every time an actor takes a stage or gets in front of a screen, every time a singer or a songwriter that you know and respect, even the famous ones, every time they put their next creation in front of you, that is how vulnerable they actually are. It can suck. And they have made themselves vulnerable to that reaction. Do they stop once they get beat up? I just watched Adam Sandler watch this little ceremony, Adam Sandler winning the Mark Twain Prize for Comedy. If you don't know what that is, it's fun to look up who's won before. And these ceremonies are hilarious because their best friends get up and crack jokes about them. It's sort of a mini roast and mini tribute. And Adam Sandler has made, 30, 40 movies, 50 movies, grossed billions of dollars. Has never won an award of any kind, ever. Ever. Nothing. The only award he's ever won is from Nickelodeon. Somebody made a joke about this is the first award that doesn't involve getting goop dumped on your head, because the kids Nickelodeon awards, they used to do that to people. Slime, yeah. So he's never won a single award, and he has been savaged by critics his entire career since the very beginning, right? Well, that's impressive. That's impressive. Like his movies or not, I happen to like a lot of them. Like his movies or not, find him funny or not, that's a guy who puts himself in front of a camera knowing not only the audience might never show up, but some snarky PhD in in movie history at the New York Times, which is a great newspaper, is going to write a column saying, enough already from this adolescent, no-talent schmuck. Sick of it. When is he going to learn another trick? How would you feel? How would I feel? How many things have you never done, or I never done? I'm 100% included in this, because of how the reviews would play. And that guy just soldiers on. He gets validation where he can get it. He makes work that's the best he can make it. And the chips fall where they may. I don't know how you stay that vulnerable, but it's worth trying, and it's worth thinking about, to me. The first time I applied for a mortgage, I'm a singer-songwriter, right? So I wouldn't give me a loan if given the chance. I walked into Wells Fargo. It was the only time, I gave away the ending to this story, the only time I ever walked into a bank to apply for a mortgage as a solo, before I met my wife. When I met my wife, she owned a house, so I married the house. But otherwise, so I walked into Wells Fargo, and I was making decent money. I'm a kind of an unusually successful singer-songwriter by most standards. Not a star, but I've made a living singing my own songs for 20-something years. And at that time, it was 7, 8, 9 years, 10 years. Actual income. I pay my taxes. I have an accountant. It's like real. The whole thing's real. I even deposit cash. Cash sales. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was for real. I walked into the bank, and I said, could I apply for a mortgage? And he opens my last year of taxes, the booklet from the accountant, and is like, yeah, no. You're better off renting. And I'm thinking, I was vulnerable walking in. I was not vulnerable walking out, and I never walked in again to another bank. Can you relate? I never tried again. Met my wife, married her house, and by the way, I even had a great credit score. Everything good. But would you loan $500,000 to somebody who may have a few gigs over the next few months? I mean, I wouldn't. I get it. It's dicey, but I never risked the embarrassment again. That's what I'm talking about. Being vulnerable. And by the way, very possible I would have gotten a loan from somebody else. I just maybe had the wrong guy on the wrong day, maybe the wrong moment in the economy, the wrong interest rate. Who the hell knows? I never tried again because my vulnerability reached its limit in 5 seconds with that guy. That was it. And I snapped shut and never applied again. Anybody here relate? A moment like that? So where would my financial life be if I had persisted and dared to walk in again to a different bank? The most painful example in my mind of my financial life that could have been, never mind, actually the second most painful. The most painful is that I was a computer programmer in the 90s and quit the industry to sing songs. That was a terrible, terrible choice financially. But at the crash in 2007, 2008, you remember house prices fell through the floor. And in Phoenix, there were brand new condos. I was in and out of Phoenix all the time to sing. There were condos there, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 condos that had dropped below $50,000 because renters left town, home prices collapsed, and I knew what I was looking at. I knew it. I was looking at $50,000 condo, and it was definitely going to come back up. Definitely. Right? These things do. Life is cycles. I'm an economics major. We studied cycles. No one's in charge of them, but they are unstoppable. Cycle down, cycle up. Cycle down, cycle up. The next time anybody says prices will never be this low again, yes, they will. Guaranteed. Always happens. This will never recover. Yes, it will. Right? And I went into a bank. It's the only other time I ever did it. And I said, I'm looking for a mortgage for $50,000. And he said, can't do it. And once again, it's the only other time I've ever tried it. And he said no, and I never tried another place. And you know what those condos are worth now? $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 again, or more, with what Phoenix has done and boomed in the last few years. So, whether it's a financial opportunity, an emotional opportunity, a romantic opportunity, an artistic opportunity, learning to paint, how embarrassing, right? Learning to fix something in your home, how embarrassing. And I'm putting the words in how embarrassing it is, but I'm not kind of joking. Learning to play piano as a grown-up, how embarrassing. You sound like a little kid when you play, right? So you fill in the blank. You find the spot in your life where vulnerability opens up all kinds of possibilities, and non-vulnerability closes them. And I have found, as I've just thought about it, and I'm going to wrap up now, I'm done, that all the best things in life, the art, the relationship, the talent, the work, the travel, it all requires being true and honest about how you feel and exposing yourself to hurt. Even when it works, the hurt still comes. But if you don't even try, if you stay protected, you don't just insulate yourself from the hurts. You insulate yourself from all the good that life has to offer. And there's a lot of good. Let me sing you a song to close. I'm through asking where I'm going. I've been asking all my life. I've grown tired of all this wondering when everything seems to turn out right. So when my mind needs something to do, wants to know the future, I whisper this: I'm okay. I've always been, and I'll always be that way. So here goes nothing. I'm taking a chance. I'm opening up, knowing that I'm in good hands. And here goes everything. It's all on the line. Oh, but I'm not afraid this time. Some say it's crazy. Some say naive to close my eyes and take the leap. But I know better, 'cause I believe even in the dark my soul can see. So when my mind plays its usual games, I've always been, and I'll always be that way. I'm okay. I've always been, and I'll always be that way.
And so let's again return to our basic proposition. We are surrounded by a law of mind. It is a creative law. It responds to our thinking exactly as we think. And through careful practice, gradually we can weed out all negative thoughts, and we can replace them with positive ones. So the whole matter is simplified, and finally we come to realize that we are dealing only with our own thoughts, while our thoughts in their turn are acted on by the power greater than we are. It is wonderful to know that we do not have to coerce this power. It is always there, always ready, always able and willing to respond. But it is impossible for it to respond to us in any other way than by corresponding to our thinking. It is indeed like a mirror reflecting back our thoughts to us. We do the thinking, the mirror does the reflecting. If we want the picture in the mirror to change, we change the image in front of it. And so it is with our thoughts.